All right, today we're tackling a pretty explosive topic. How exactly should the world handle Iran? We're going to deconstruct the segment from Sky News Australia that offers a very clear and, let's be honest, a very aggressive answer. So let's get right into it. So the entire argument we're looking at really boils down to this one central question. When you're faced with a hostile regime, the source material says there are basically only two choices you can make: show strength or appease. And believe me, they do not sit on the fence here. They pick a side, and they pick it hard.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how they frame two very different world leaders. Then, we're going to dig into their preferred strategy, which they call the language of strength. After that, we'll check out their take on Iran's internal stability, how they connect it all to U.S. politics, and finally, what they claim the Iranian people actually want.
All right, first up, the key players. The source immediately creates this really stark black and white contrast between two leaders, the UK's Keir Starmer and former US President Donald Trump. And you can just see that contrast laid out so clearly here. On one side, you've got Keir Starmer, who's portrayed as weak, ineffective. The commentary literally accuses him of weak appeasement. Then, on the other side, you have Donald Trump. He's presented as this powerful, decisive figure, praised for his courage and guts, and framed as the only leader out there who's actually willing to take a real stand.
And wow, this quote really says it all about the tone, doesn't it? They absolutely do not pull any punches. Calling the sitting Prime Minister of the UK a village idiot? That tells you everything you need to know about their contempt for anyone they see as being soft on Iran. This kind of language just sets the scene for their entire argument.
So, now that Trump has been painted as the hero of this story, what's his actual strategy? Well, this is where the segment dives deep into the philosophy behind his approach, something they call the language of strength.
And this quote from the show's guest, Goldie Gamari, really gets to the heart of the matter. The core idea is simple. Any attempt at negotiation is just seen as weakness. According to their argument, the only thing the Iranian regime understands, the only thing it respects, is pure, unfiltered strength.
So what does this language of strength look like in practice? The source lays out this pretty intense three-step plan they say Trump is using. First, a total all-or-nothing economic blockade. Second, one last chance to talk. Take it or leave it. And step 3, it's an ultimatum, unconditional surrender, or, and I'm quoting here, face eradication. This is not a negotiation, it's a demand. So you might be wondering, why do they think such an aggressive strategy would even work? Well, it's because, according to the source, the Iranian regime is already on the verge of collapsing anyway. To make their case, they start with some historical context. They point to 47 years of what they call brutal oppression, and the argument is that after all this time, the regime has basically zero popular support and is just fundamentally unstable from the inside out. And here is the supposed proof they offer for this collapse. They claim the supreme leader is missing in action, other key leaders are dead, the military is a total wreck, and the government is so scared that it hasn't even held a public funeral for a previous leader. The picture they're painting is of a regime in its absolute last dying breaths. And this is where the argument takes a fascinating turn, because it connects everything right back to domestic politics in the United States. The source claims that some American politicians are actively working against this language of strength.
Now this is one of the most explosive claims in the entire segment. The guest says she watches Iranian state TV and sees them broadcasting anti-Trump statements made by American Democrats. The implication, of course, is that they're basically working together.
And all of this builds to a pretty incredible conclusion from the guest. She doesn't just say this is wrong, she actually calls it a little bit treasonous. Treasonous. That is an incredibly strong accusation, essentially putting Trump's political opponents on the same side as Iran's regime.
And to really drive this point home, the guest makes this truly remarkable claim. She says Trump's approval rating inside Iran is over 90%, way higher than in the US. The argument is that his American critics are completely out of touch with the very people they claim to support.
So that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. What does the source claim is the real message coming from the Iranian people themselves?
This is a really shocking claim. The guest argues that the Iranian people hate their own government so intensely that they would rather see foreign bombs dropped on their country's military facilities than see the regime survive. Think about that. They're supposedly more afraid of their own leaders than of an outside attack. And this is the final takeaway, the ultimate call to action presented in this piece. They claim the message from the Iranian people isn't about peace talks or negotiations. Nope, it's a plea for foreign leaders to step in and, as they put it, finish the job.
So we're left with the really challenging question that this entire narrative poses. By telling a story where a country's own people are supposedly begging for a foreign military intervention, the source forces us all to think about the implications. What does it really mean when a nation's people allegedly look outside their own borders for liberation?